Last night, I met a friend of mine, an Armenian-British man, a bit older than I, and we decided to go and have dinner at a gastropub just down the road from here, and to catch up on a whole range of issues since we hadn't met for quite a long time. Now, the pub was very nice. The food was quite nice too. Unfortunately, there was no Guinness because the pump was not working. So we ended up with 2 pints of lager, and the conversation started flowing from one topic to another, from one theme to another, like two friends who've done political lobbying in the past and who've drifted in different directions. And here they were meeting at a pub on a Tuesday night and catching up. What is more normal than that? What is equally more normal than that? Than when two Armenians, irrespective of their nationalities and their geographies across the world, when two Armenians meet, at some stage, it is inevitable that they should speak about matters Armenian. This is not only an Armenian characteristic, this is a characteristic of many, many communities and peoples, particularly when those communities or peoples are numerical minorities in different countries. So let me tell you a little bit about the conversation I had with my friend on Armenian matters over a pint of lager and a nice fish and chips. And welcome again, after a long absence, to Intuitive Reactions, Nagorno-Karabakh and Armenian Matters number 32. Now, of course, when Armenians these days talk about Armenian issues, unlike past years, the conversation doesn't start with the issue of the genocide of 1915, who's recognized it, who's not recognized it, who's tried to lobby for it, who's failed to lobby for it. No, the conversation these days in most Armenian communities in the diaspora, at least worldwide, focuses, those conversations focus on the issue of what is happening in Armenia and what is happening in Nagorno-Karabakh, known to Armenians as Artsakh. Why? I do not need to remind you that not too far in the past, there was a vicious war that took place, whereby this time Azerbaijan won, and won decisively, and retook some of the lands that, in my opinion, as a legal scholar, were occupied territories, but then went further into the enclave, the oblast of Nagorno-Karabakh, and also seized some other places, not least the strategic and important town of Shushi. Now, as a consequence of this war and the mediation of the Russian Federation, particularly President Vladimir Putin, a 9-point agreement was reached in November of the year in which they agreed to do this, that, and the other. Since then, things have been very tenuous, things have been very difficult for Armenians. Why? Because they've lost the war, they lost territory in Karabakh, but more importantly, because they became vulnerable. Not only the enclave itself, but Armenia proper became vulnerable to the dictates and whims of a bully, frankly, the president of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, who was cherishing, relishing his decisive victory, and whether openly or not, was imposing pressure upon the Armenians in order to do this and that by sort of trying to have incursions into Armenian territory, by trying to say, you've got to do this and you've got to do that. And of course, the Armenians, being weak and vulnerable, having lost the war, with a military that was decisively out of sync with modern warfare for the early 2020s, could not actually put up a fight the way you would when a bully or an enemy or a foe comes and tells you, hey, I'm going to push you back. I want to take this. You know what? Nagorno-Karabakh is no longer an issue for me because I have conquered that enclave, and now it becomes an Azerbaijani issue, not an international or Armenian issue. And the Armenians have problems resisting that because they do not have the military wherewithal, and equally, I do not particularly think that they have the resolute political determination to fight back or push back. So, you guessed it, my friend and I talked about this. And we talked about, of course, the meetings that have been organized and hosted in different places. The last one only took place a day or two ago in Brussels by the European Council President Charles Michel with the Armenian Prime Minister Pashinyan and the Azerbaijani President Aliyev. And of course, different things come out of these meetings. Different facts and figures, factoids, are leaked from these meetings. Each side trying to undermine the confidence and self-assurance of the other side and pretending that the international community is with them and that for all intents and purposes, the Karabakh issue has been resolved. Armenia is going to sign on the dotted line, and that's going to be the end of it. Well, my friend, who has more experience, I would suspect, in Armenian matters than I do, was very concerned. He was very concerned about what is happening to the main actors outside Armenia and Azerbaijan. And who are those three main actors? Iran, Turkey, and Russia. Now, let us start with Russia. And we discussed Russia. We discussed the Russia-Ukraine war. We discussed the monitors who were supposed to monitor the road leading from Armenia to Nagorno-Karabakh via the Lachin corridor. The Russian Federation, which was supposed to be, in a sense, the referee to make sure that things don't turn worse. Well, Russia is busy and very busy, in fact, with a war with Ukraine that is not really going well for it. It's a war that is draining resources on both sides, actually, of the war, and one that is making life very, very difficult. So Russia is not pulling its weight the way Armenians perhaps thought that it would at the end of that second decisive war. But also Turkey. Turkey is actually becoming, President Erdogan is becoming more and more bullish. He's basically shifting his geopolitical priorities from one minute to the other. One minute he wants to have an agreement with Armenia, open borders, diplomatic relations, everything is okay. The next minute he pulls back, probably because of Azerbaijani pressure to hold back, or because he's playing a game of give and take, and the Armenians are unable to counter that, again, given their strategic weakness at this stage. We've seen him do this and turn the political volte-faces that Turkey has actually shown in the past, be that with Libya, be that with Syria, be that with the southern Caucasus, be that in the Ukraine-Russia war. All this is showing that Erdogan is trying to play a game where he thinks he will be the victor at the end in terms of the geostrategic interests of Turkey. And what to him are those geostrategic interests? They're not what you and I would necessarily define those in, say, a book or a dissertation, but they are also, and perhaps more importantly, the forthcoming elections in which he is going to face a lot of difficulties with a runaway inflation and with a country that is becoming increasingly unhappy with his very how should I put it, with his very egocentric rule over this vast and beautiful republic. So Turkey is becoming stronger, Russia is becoming less active, and then we have Iran. And I've always said, and I'm sure others would agree with me, that Iran is a very important neighbor for Armenia. And Armenians would be loath to ignore Iran and not to build more and more bridges with Iran, irrelevant, irrespective, regardless of the sanctions and the US-Iran standoff over the JCPOA. Because Iran has proven to be, at the very least, a neutral country in this war between Azerbaijan and Armenia. If push comes to shove, I would say that it actually sides more with Armenia and Armenian interests than it does with Azerbaijani ones, for demographic reasons of its own, but also for geostrategic reasons at a time when it itself and its economy are pretty much in meltdown. So that's Iran for you, that's Russia, and that's Turkey. And in the middle of this, we have Charles Michel and the EU who are trying to tailor an agreement, a truce, an understanding between Azerbaijan and Armenia. And in these negotiations that are taking place here, there, and everywhere, the worrying thing about Armenians in the diaspora, and perhaps about Armenians in the diaspora more than those in the Republic itself, because they're one or two layers removed from the daily realities on the ground, and therefore conspiracy theories abound. They start listening to gossip. They follow religiously what is posted on Facebook and forget that this is nothing more than gossip and drivel. Yes, it points to something, but that's not basically where politics lie. All this means that the Armenians are getting worried. Why? Because the Azerbaijani president, confident of his victory and his military force as well as wealth, particularly now with the energy shortages across Europe and the need for any gas or oil from all over the world, versus an Armenian prime minister who, in my opinion, does not really have that much experience in leadership, but more importantly, who actually seems to think that politics should be conducted behind closed doors, and there is no need for the Armenians, whether the 3 whatever million in the Republic itself or the many more millions across the diaspora, the Middle East, Europe, Australia, the United States, and North America. He seems to think, and there are messages that are coming. One message at the end of this latest summit was that I read that he thinks that this whole business with Karabakh would be wrapped up by the end of the year. Now, what does wrapped up mean? What are the clauses of such an agreement? What is being put together? Where is the role of the OSCE? I mean, at some stage, the OSCE was, for all intents and purposes, only Russia. The others were dormant. But now Russia is also busy. So it seems to me that Azerbaijan thinks that the OSCE is no longer necessary because, as I said, in his opinion, there is no more a conflict. So there is no need for the OSCE Minsk group to contribute to any resolution. So as Prime Minister Pashinyan shilly-shallies, as he maintains this sort of obscure form of negotiations, as if he alone understands what the Holy Grail stands for. This, and as long as Armenians, whether in their approach to their military wherewithal, whether in their approach to politics, whether in their outreach, are not pushing back as much as they should, then Armenians, particularly in the diaspora, get more worried. So for me, to conclude this picture, and I'm sharing this picture with you as a consequence of my conversations with my friend over at the pub, I'm not basically reinventing the wheel. I don't intend to do that. Nor am I saying that I'm the negotiator or the person who could engage in conflict resolution. My expertise and area in track 2 and conflict resolution is in another part of the world. I do not pretend to know any more than the average Armenian living on this global village. But that average Armenian is concerned about the military impotence of the Armenian Republic, which means that they are a tiny little hamlet almost in the southern Caucasus. And I've heard people saying that Turkish attempts at recognition are primarily in order to disempower Armenia, get that connection to Nakhichevan, which means that Turks and Azeris could go in and out of Armenian supposedly sovereign territory as they wish. All this is happening because there is a hope in Turkey that a former treaty, the Alexandropol Treaty, would be revived, which basically at that time had suggested that Armenia should constitute only of Yerevan and pretty little else. So all this means that two things: without preaching, without pretending to be knowledgeable or arrogant about it, only concern and worry, which is what permeated from our conversations. My friend was talking, call him Edward Yetvart, call him whatever you want. I'm not going to say who that person was for very simple and obvious reasons. He was talking more and I was listening more, and then I was asking questions, and then I was giving him my opinion as somebody who is a bit more removed from this conflict, but who has some experience in peacemaking issues. One, the need to work on the military prowess of the country. How it is done is not my job. There is a Ministry of Defense there. Second, the outreach of the Foreign Ministry. What is the Foreign Ministry doing? How well is it conveying the message of what is happening behind closed doors to not only Armenians abroad, but also to other countries, allies and neutral friends as well? What is the Foreign Ministry doing? What are the functionaries of the Foreign Ministry doing? I'm not only talking about one person. The foreign policy of a country is not only one person, be that person in whoever, Mirzoyan or whoever. What is being done to keep the channels of communication open? And within those channels of communication, there is, to the best of my knowledge, a diaspora department within the Foreign Ministry. How much is that diaspora ministry, that little cell, how much effort is it engaging with in order to liaise with Armenians abroad and tell them what is happening in Armenia? Because remember, a lot of those people living abroad, overwhelming majority of the Armenians who live outside Armenia itself, they didn't descend from heaven. They didn't just come there by an accident in a petri dish. Those people, Armenians like me, are the product of the genocide. They have an interest in what happens to that country, because that country, look, there are 60,000 plus or minus Armenians still living in Armenia, in Turkey, mainly in Istanbul, who are the living witnesses of the genocide of 1915. And those who are abroad are the daughters, sons, granddaughters, grandsons, great-granddaughters, great-grandsons of those victims of the genocide. So they have not only a commitment, but an interest and a resolve to know what is happening. So military first, foreign affairs two, Department of the Diaspora third. And finally, my suggestion, and I shared this and we discussed this, and I've done a little bit of that in different contexts in the past. My suggestion was that any agreement that is reached between Armenia and Azerbaijan, or Armenia and Turkey, should be put to a public referendum. Now, if I want to complicate things, I would say to a referendum of all Armenians worldwide, but that's not going to work. That is impractical and it won't work. It's a bit like saying that all Palestinians across the whole world should have a voice in what happens in Palestine under occupation. It is impractical and it makes the situation 10 times worse than what it is already. But Armenians in Armenia, who are the primary landlords of this conflict, should themselves have a say in how the irenic process moves forward. So will the Armenians do that? Will Prime Minister Pashinyan do that? Or does he think he knows better? I have no idea. I leave this with you. And as we ended our meal and had our drinks and had a nice chat and then left, it was dark and wet outside, a little bit reflecting my mood at the end of the evening, because until then we were in great shape talking about all sorts of things that we hadn't discussed for a while now. I thought to myself, where will we go? And when will Armenians start realizing that they have to work together, not pull in different directions, with an opposition that is pretty much redundant in Armenia? We saw all those demonstrations in the main square. Nothing, because they themselves don't have solutions. They only shout and yell to say, we don't like this and we don't like that. Well, what do you like then? Or the government that still thinks it is leading a soft revolution, and the diaspora, who from outside likes to think that they have an equal say in what happens in Armenia. The say is not equal, but it is still important. And for Armenia not to squander further its assets, whether it's hard power or soft power, there has to be a coming together. And that coming together is as much the responsibility of diasporan organizations as it is that of the authorities in Yerevan and across Armenia too. So with these worries that I merely share with you, and you can do whatever you want with them, you can pickle them or you can mull over them, I hope and wish Armenia the best. It's a small country, but above that, it's also a very potent symbol for all Armenians worldwide. Take care.